tonight's World Insight with Tian Wei, Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad on a visit to China. How much potential cooperation? And in tonight's Women on Top, wrapping up the week is a Renaissance woman, an artist of many talents. She's Liu Sola, a well-regarded author, prolific writer, and prodigious composer. Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. We begin our show today with relations between China and Malaysia. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad is paying an official visit to China barely 3 months after his return to power. The visit is at the invitation of Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, and the two sides are expected to discuss cooperation and regional issues. Before we get down to the discussion, let's take a look at this first.
The father of modern Malaysia visiting after almost 20 years. Malaysia's 93-year-old Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad embarked on a 5-day visit to China for bilateral relations and regional affairs. He arrived in Hangzhou on Friday and set ahead for Beijing on Saturday, where Chinese Premier Li Keqiang will host a welcome ceremony. Mahathir became the new Prime Minister in May. Ahead of his visit, he told China's Xinhua news agency that the relationship with China is very important and his government wanted close ties. Earlier this month, while meeting with Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Malaysia, Mahathir also promised to defend shared interests against protectionism.
Dr. Mahathir, always voices what he feels about it. Then I think on the sovereignty part of it, I think Mahathir could be more forceful on the issue. It's still in the context of dialogue, context of, peaceful discussion.
This will be Mahathir's first visit to China since May. He has visited China 7 times when he was Prime Minister from 1981 to 2003. Relations between the two sides took a big step during his first stint. Also during that period, the country went on the track of fast modernization and economic growth, while the Prime Minister promoted the integration of Southeast Asian economies. Since 2009, China has been Malaysia's largest trading partner and the largest source of foreign direct investment in manufacturing in the past 2 years. The Belt and Road Initiative has more to offer Malaysia as well. Mahathir's visit is expected to improve cooperation in development strategies and mutually beneficial initiatives.
So, what can we expect from Malaysian Prime Minister's visit to China this time? And what about the potential of bilateral relations? That's a question in many's minds. Let's turn to our panelists to answer those questions. With us in Beijing studio, Rong Ying, Vice President, China Institute of International Studies. What a pleasure to have you, sir, here in Beijing studio. Also joining us here, we have Victor Gao Zhikai, current affairs commentator, also chairman of the CESI, Vice President of CCG. Welcome. In Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, we invited Rustam Mod Isa, who is the chairman and chief executive of the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, a very well-respected scholar from Malaysia. Welcome, Rustam Isa. I want to start with you, Rustam Isa, about the Prime Minister's visit to China.
Yes.
More than 90 years old, wow. But at the same time, very enthusiastic after 3 months in power, coming to China to check about the latest possibilities for Malaysia. The two countries have been working together for decades. But at this point, Rustam Isa, what do you think are some of the most crucial areas that the two sides need to discuss and possibly come up with consensus?
Well, as you've said, relations have been very strong between Malaysia and China. Mind you, it has been mentioned earlier that the Prime Minister had visited China 7 times before. And his first visit, I believe, was in 1985. That was just 11 years after Malaysia and China established diplomatic relations. And now he's visiting China again on the 44th year of the anniversary of Malaysia-China relations, and next year we'll be celebrating 45 years of relations. So the relations are strong. If you are asking about issues, yes, there are a number of issues I think that the Prime Minister will want to discuss in particular about the projects that have been instituted in Malaysia, the railway projects and the pipeline projects, which have gained headlines both here in Malaysia and around the world as well.
All right. Mr. Rong, Belt and Road Initiative is an initiative China has been working on with many of those in Southeast Asia, Malaysia certainly included. With the recent ups and downs, how is China seeing that potential really in the near future?
Well, of course, BRI is an initiative put forward by China and welcomed by countries around the world, and in particularly, I think, our neighboring countries. And Malaysia is one of the first countries that has been expressed support and readiness to participate this initiative. And when the new government, took over,
the new administration.
Yeah, new administration, exactly, and they continue to express its readiness to actively support that and would like to participate, take part in that. So this is, I think, a positive momentum sign, and as our colleague from Malaysia mentioned, that this is again indication of a strong and close relationship between the two countries.
Therefore, I have to go back to Rostam Isa about the sustainable foundation that the two countries should enjoy and could enjoy when it comes to Belt and Road Initiative as well as other economic and trade cooperation. Is that sustainability there?
Yes, I think so. As has been said, Malaysia welcomed the previous administration or government in Malaysia welcomed the Belt and Road, and this government, I believe, also welcomes the various initiatives under the Belt and Road proposed by President Xi Jinping. For Malaysia as a maritime nation, as a trading nation, the maritime Silk Road component of the BRI is certainly very important. But if we look at relations as a whole, Dr. Mahathir himself has said during his first visit to China that economic cooperation and trade should be the foundation for relations between Malaysia and China, because he could foresee that China at that time was already moving in the direction of further development, progress and economic prosperity. So if you look at trade, for example, now Malaysia is the largest trading partner for China in ASEAN, and China, of course, is the #1 trading partner for Malaysia. And the volume is big. It's at one point it almost touched $100 billion US.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Gao, as Rostam Isa mentioned, Malaysian Prime Minister Mohamad has been into China many times. Actually, he has been interacting with different generations of Chinese leaders very closely, I have to say. And certainly, as a result of that, one would assume Mr. Mohamad will be able to understand the goals that China has in mind when it comes to its economic development, when it comes to its foreign policy, when it comes to its potential of development. How much do you think, Mr. Gao, if the understanding is there, could help with both sides to resolve some of the issues that we're facing right now?
Well, first of all, we warmly welcome Prime Minister Dr. Mohamad Mahathir on his very important visit to China. This is his first official visit outside of Malaysia since he became the Prime Minister. He's 93 years old, so he's the oldest serving Prime Minister in the whole world. So in that sense, we congratulate him. He is a great statesman in Malaysia and is highly respected by China, by the Chinese people, by the Chinese government for many, many years. Of course, when he was running for the Prime Ministership, he made some announcements, took some positions, which eventually resulted in the suspension of some of the major infrastructure projects in which China was very much involved in. To that extent, I think it's very unfortunate. However, we do have faith and trust in Dr. Mahathir. We hope eventually his judgment will prevail, and through his discussions with the Chinese leaders and by witnessing the transformation in China, he will really agree that these infrastructure projects are actually in the fundamental interest of Malaysia and the Malaysian people, and we hope his sound judgment will again prevail and promote China's friendship with Malaysia.
Mr. Rong, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's visit to China is not just in Beijing. Actually, he's been traveling, he has this plan of traveling around China into several different places. So that would help him and his administration to have an updated understanding about where China is and what is China's potential. Once again, what does China want? That's important for the others to understand. So given the fact that Dr. Mohamad was quite a statesman throughout different generations of Chinese leaders as well, how will that combination work? Understanding the real issue in China today and understanding where China came from. Mr. Rong.
Yeah, as far as I know, I think the Prime Minister himself is first visiting Hangzhou before he goes to Beijing.
Right.
So this is, I think, very important, again, signal and show that he would like to know more about China, even though have visited
in order
China.
to make sound judgment.
Exactly. And of course, in Hangzhou, it is said that he is meeting Jack Ma and also the
from
Alibaba and the
TD,
and others, right? So I think it also shows that he has something in mind, even though he would like to see with his own eyes. So I think his understanding of China, about China, the past, and what is going to see the China today now would certainly help him to have work out by working together with the Chinese leaders a new way or new model for sustainable sort of cooperation, not only in economic field, but more equally important in political and on the regional.
Talking about the regional and political issues, Rastam Issa, I have to go to you about that very important issue. Dr. Mohamad has been a pioneer in expressing himself throughout decades about regionalization in Southeast Asia and also about the approach of developing countries and emerging economies together in order to be able to complement the existing world order. That has been a very strong statement coming from him throughout decades. Now, Rastam, is the issue of unilateralism, trade protectionism, and the issue even of the beginning of another new Cold War, as some already, in a way, noticed it over the past few months, coming from some countries, is an issue that many have in mind. I wonder, from Malaysia's perspective, particularly Prime Minister Mohamad, how is he looking at the issue? Is there going to be continuity also about his theories and about his stance?
Yes, he's certainly one who believes that countries, especially the small and developing countries, should get together, should work together and cooperate in order to strengthen themselves, to develop, to have a political voice. And he believes in regionalism, he believes in multilateralism, he believes in the United Nations. And certainly he does not favor unilateralism, he does not favor trade protectionism, because this is not good for the world and not good for trading nations like Malaysia. So I think he remains consistent in that. Just as I would add a comment about his knowledge of China. You have to understand that, all right, when he was Prime Minister for 22 years, he observed China. He visited China 7 times. But since then, he has also visited China several times. He has been observing China. He has been gathering knowledge and information about China. So I think he's always up to date about China. And one has to remember that it was during his administration that Malaysia invited China to come to the ASEAN meetings for the first time. Foreign Minister CGTN was here in Malaysia in 1991. So
Right.
Dr. Mahathir has always seen China as a very close friend.
But the role of Malaysia in ASEAN and the role of Malaysia in its relationship with neighboring countries has been quite some discussion involved over the past few months since the presidential campaign, Prime Minister campaign, and some of the other events. So, Mr. Gao, how do you see that? Before I go to our Malaysian friend again, I want to have your comment first.
Now, first of all, Malaysia has always been a very important pillar in the ASEAN in terms of its foundation, development, growth, and the current day operations. So in that sense, I think Malaysia commands a lot of respect, not only from other ASEAN member states, but also from countries like China. China-Malaysian relations in recent decades has been very good, and partially because of great contribution by Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir. And he has many friends here in China. We very much like him. I've quoted Dr. Mahathir on many occasions in my speeches in Malaysia. So thirdly, I think we need his great statesmanship to come back into play. We hope China and Malaysia can have very good, amicable, mutually beneficial relations, and we believe his judgment eventually will prevail.
Rustam, is Malaysia's relationship with Singapore, for example, Malaysia's relationship with some of the other neighbor countries on different issues have been very up for discussion over the past few months, we have seen. So how will Malaysia found its place once again within ASEAN and also become once again one of the major centers, shall I say, centers of the ASEAN countries, among the ASEAN countries? It's an interesting question, isn't it, for Malaysia?
No, I certainly agree with Mr. Gao that Malaysia has been a very active member of ASEAN. And in fact, if you look at the founding of ASEAN itself, it was Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and Singapore that brought ASEAN together. But the thrust of the association itself was really Indonesia and Malaysia. But now, relations with the neighboring countries and with the ASEAN countries are good, I think. There are, of course, issues which need to be discussed. Some issues, Dr. Mahathir has said, would be revisited. But I think this is normal in the course of relations between neighbors. There are issues that need to be ironed out, and I don't think we have any problem. In fact, I would expect that Dr. Mahathir would begin looking at initiatives to strengthen ASEAN further, and you know, he has visited his colleagues in Indonesia, and he has also met with leaders, a few leaders of the ASEAN countries already, and I'm sure when they meet towards the end of the year during the ASEAN summit, there will be a lot of things to discuss.
Right. Asia as a whole, Mr. Rong, including the ASEAN countries, East Asian countries, are active players on the international trade and economic scene, and therefore how the international trade rules are being designed and how the international system, which, as Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has been saying over the decade, need to be complemented with the recent development and improvement. How can that be done? It's still a question mark hanging in the air. How much will China and Malaysia be able to work on that together?
Yeah, I think Malaysia has always been, as with the two previous panelists have been talking about, that play a very important role. Dr. Mahathir himself actually is one of the architect and advocate for ASEAN, East Asia sort of identity, and is working very hard in putting on that. And at this stage, as the region and the world at large is undergoing such a dramatic changes and facing so many uncertainties, I think we are looking forward, and I think China certainly would like to work closely with Malaysia and to find a new way or new approach to deal with that, to promote the building of that identity, as I think China and the so-called 10+3 are working together to build the East Asia Economic Community by 2020. So all in all, I think there are many things and China and Malaysia can work on at the political front,
right.
and particularly in terms of promoting regional integration.
I see. Before we go, Rustam Issa, I want to come back to you once again, but very briefly as we're running out of time for this discussion. Now, economies have to not only look at the international policies, but also have to look at their own structures and their own challenges in order to make sure the House are being attended, at the same time looking at the international cooperation. How about Malaysia in that regard? Very briefly before we wrap it back.
Yeah, well, this government now, of course, is looking at the economy of the country. One major challenge is, of course, finances. According to the Minister of Finance, the country's finances are in pretty bad shape because of what is regarded as mismanagement by the previous administration. But I think Malaysia has a strong economic foundation to pull through as we move ahead. You know, there are many new initiatives that the Prime Minister and the government will take, and I think we will be able to weather whatever problems or storms that come our way.
We hope that will be the case. We'll see how the two countries can cooperate on many possibilities. Thank you so much, gentlemen, the three of you, for being with us. Rustam Mod Issa, coming from Malaysia, as well as our two Chinese panelists, Mr. Rong Ying, last but not least, Victor Gao Zhikai. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. And you are watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, still to come on our program.